In 2019, the United States practically wrote Huawei's obituary. They declared it finished. No cutting-edge chips, no advanced tools, no hope. Or so they thought. But fast forward to today, Huawei just shipped an AI accelerator so potent, Washington is now quietly briefing allies about what they're calling an unacceptable leap. We're talking 800 teraflops of half-precision power, a massive 128 gigabytes of HBM3 memory, and a cluster scale that can swallow 100,000 chips, making them act as one logical brain. And the kicker: it was all built without a single Dutch EUV machine, without TSMC, without America. A single chilling question is now rattling boardrooms from Silicon Valley to Capitol Hill. How on earth did they pull this off? When the entity list hammer dropped, Washington's playbook looked simple, almost foolproof. Starve Huawei of 5nm silicon, choke off their ARM licenses, kneecap their software stack, and the company would surely bleed out in 2 quarters. Right? They even leaned on third-party foundries, making any wafer traced back to US tech contraband. The expectation was capitulation, a surrender. Instead, Huawei pivoted hard. They froze smartphone production, sold off the Honor brand for much-needed cash, and famously redirected 20,000 engineers toward one audacious moonshot: build a domestic AI engine that would render the sanctions utterly irrelevant. That emergency wartime budget? A cool $30 billion, quietly parked inside a Shanghai holding company and cryptically labeled Project Da Vinci. Nobody outside Zhongguancun took it seriously. Not really until now. Extreme ultraviolet lithography. Or EUV prints the finest chip features on the planet. And ASML? They're the only shop that sells the gear. Buy an EUV scanner and you sign a US end-user agreement. Huawei was never ever going to get one. So what did they do? They did what brilliant engineers do under immense pressure. They squeezed the very last drop of performance out of yesterday's toys. SMIC's older deep ultraviolet DUV scanners can only resolve 7nm lines after triple and quadruple patterning. Each extra pass, though, multiplies defect risk and halves wafer throughput. Huawei compensated with brutal overdesign. We're talking bigger dies, redundant circuits, on-chip error correction, and a clever packaging trick they call dual chiplet stitching. 2 SN910B dies talk to each other over an organic interposer at 2 terabytes per second, effectively behaving like one giant, powerful slab of silicon. The yield? Ugly. The economics? Even worse. But once the wafer starts, every single chip that passes binning delivers 800 T-flops of FP16 math, enough to train a 10 billion parameter model without ever touching NVIDIA gear. Sanctions said impossible. SMIC, it seems, replied, "Hold my beer. AI chips, let's be honest, live or die by memory bandwidth, not just raw logic." Huawei licensed HBM3 layout rules from a South Korean house, then asked Changshin Memory, CXMT, to build the stacks at home. CXMT delivered an impressive 128 gigabytes per device, running 3.2 terabytes per second. That's more capacity than an H100. Almost the same bandwidth, and all for only 310 watts at the wall. Cooling that in a Shanghai data center summer, however, is a whole other story. Engineers bolted vapor chamber heat sinks the size of paperback books onto each module, and designed the boards so air flows front to back like a jet turbine. The result? Stable, sustained clocks within 2 degrees of the red line. Huawei claims a 4 exaflops SuperPod can stay below 1.5 kilowatts per rack. Independent testers measured 1.6. Close enough, wouldn't you say? When you can't buy NVIDIA's DGX, you simply build your own, and you over-engineer absolutely everything. Hardware is only half the battle, isn't it? Software truly decides whether developers show up and stay. Huawei's answer is CAN, Compute Architecture for Neural Networks. It looks a lot like CUDA's Chinese cousin. Same core concepts of streams, events, and kernels, but recompiled specifically for the Da Vinci cores. Porting a PyTorch model? Just run the automated graph mapper. 90% of the operations have native counterparts. TensorFlow, Paddle, even ONNX import paths exist. Sure, the toolchain still spits out the occasional cryptic error, but campus coders in Shenzhen say debug time is down from weeks to mere days. Mindspore, Huawei's homegrown framework, goes even further by auto-parallelizing across a 4096 chip pod without needing user hints. Western analysts, of course, sneered at yet another stack, until benchmarks finally leaked. ResNet 50, training on 1024 Ascend 9010Cs, finishes in a blistering 28.7 minutes, putting it neck and neck with an A100 cluster of the same scale. Developers, ultimately, care about speed, not politics. CAN just has to be good enough. And it absolutely is. Single chips impress, sure. But clusters? They change entire industries. Huawei's SuperPod bolts together 4096 Ascend 910Cs in one liquid-cooled rack row, then links those rows with Unified Bus 2.0, an ingenious in-house protocol that rides standard Ethernet PHY but speaks proprietary congestion control. Latency stays under 3 microseconds, hop to hop. Bandwidth scales linearly until the topology hits a staggering 100,000 devices. At that point, the entire array presents itself to the scheduler as a single virtual GPU with 80 exaflops of BF16. Throughput, roughly 20 times the AI horsepower of the current fastest US supercomputer. China's national AI cloud already runs language models. North of 1 trillion parameters on this rig. Customers book nodes by the minute with a domestic credit card. No ITAR paperwork, no license anxiety, no sudden presidential order blocking your workload. For researchers in Jakarta, Nairobi or São Paulo, that freedom, honestly, tastes better than raw speed. If you're finding this deep dive useful, then please tap that like button. It tells the algorithm this story matters. And definitely consider subscribing for more tech that moves the world while nobody's really looking. Washington imagined that cutting Huawei from global fabs would cripple innovation. Instead, what it actually did was create a live-fire exercise in import substitution. Every roadblock triggered a state-backed sprint. Photoresist chemicals from Ningbo, etchers from AMEC, EDA tools from X-Epic, and wafer subsidies worth $2 billion per quarter. The ecosystem that emerges looks eerily like Silicon Valley circa 1980, vertically integrated, cash-rich, and racing a mortal enemy. Except this time, the enemy is a trade blacklist, and the market is 1.4 billion consumers plus Belt and Road partners who are more than happy to buy non-American kit. Huawei claims it has de-Americanized 92% of component spend across its entire enterprise board. Even the skeptical analysts at CSIS admit 70% look solid. Sanctions didn't kill the dragon. They merely locked it in a cave with a stack of weights, and it emerged Schwarzenegger ripped to Nvidia booked $18 billion in China revenue just last year. Huawei now offers a plug-compatible alternative at half the sticker price and zero geopolitical risk. Domestic cloud giants like Baidu and ByteDance are signing million-chip purchase orders because keeping data on home silicon suddenly aligns perfectly with shareholder value. Qualcomm feels the chill too. Huawei's Kirin modems are back in-house, erasing a $5 billion annual socket overnight. Apple, iPhone shipments in Greater China dropped a staggering 33% year-over-year. Patriotic pride. Wall Street still prices NVDA like growth is eternal. Meanwhile, Shenzhen fabs run 3 shifts. And every wafer out the door is one less future sale for Santa Clara. The chip gap isn't zero, no, but it's narrowing faster than any model predicted, because the model's never priced in desperation-driven engineering. Roadmaps circulating inside. Chinese venture circles show the Ascend 950 TCR sampling in Q1 2026 on a 5nm SMIC node. Then the C by year-end with stacked wafer-on-wafer bonding. The 960 in 2027 adds proprietary HBM4. The 970 in 2028 integrates silicon photonics for chip-to-light links at 1 petabit per second. Each node, crucially, assumes a continued lack of EUV, which means SMIC is betting absolutely everything on high NA DUV and multi-patterning tricks once thought utterly insane. If they clear even one of those hurdles before ASML ships its next-gen EUV to Intel or TSMC, the performance delta collapses, and the cost advantage flips. Meanwhile, Huawei's SuperPod architecture is morphing into Cloud Matrix, a planetary-scale fabric that treats 5G base stations as edge inference nodes. Imagine every streetlight in Guangzhou as a micro data center. That's the sheer scale they're sketching. Sanctions brought Beijing a sense of urgency. And urgency, as we know, is the greatest accelerator known to engineering. Stories like this unfold every single week at the intersection of politics and silicon. Hit subscribe if you want front row seats, and drop a comment telling me which underdog tech you think will shock us next.